Hello, listener. I want to remind you to check out my new Ultra Tri Fest coming to Whistler, British Columbia in August 2024. It has 5 racing formats to choose from, and the feature event will be the new Ultra 515 Worldwide Championships, in which racers from every 515 race in the world may attend. Get all the details at ultratrifestcanada.com, and feel free to contact me personally with any questions.
You're listening to 515, the Ultra Podcast, the show that invites you into the lives of people who make up the Ultra family. Here's your host for these conversations, Larry Ryan.
Thanks, MJ. Today I thought I would share a few clips from past episodes to highlight some of the most downloaded and most talked about guests that have visited 515, the Ultra Podcast. So these are some of your favorites. If you're a longtime listener to the show, you may have heard these guests before. But if you're one of our newer listeners, it will be a great sample of the variety of guests that come on. Even if you have heard these before, I am sure that you will get something new with another listen. I hope that you enjoy this special retrospective episode. The first clip is from an episode just last season, Season 4, Episode 3. But it is already the 4th most downloaded episode, likely because the guest is a wonderful man, Manmadh Rebba. This was great because we not only learned some racing tips and heard great racing stories like Moab 240 and the Barkley Fall Classic, but we also learned more about Manmadh personally. One of the things that I pride myself on is that we get to know the whole guest on 515 and not just hear race reports from athletes. Manmadh shared some very personal stories in our conversation. In this excerpt coming up, he started talking about giving back and crewing at Ultraman in Hawaii. And then he shares a little bit about his struggle to win custody of his child. Now, in the Ultraman world, you have competed in Ultraman Florida and the World Championship 3 times from 2017 to 2019. However, more recently, you seem to focus more on ultramarathoning. And I'd like to speak about that in just a minute. But like any good Ohana member, you recently gave back to crewing at the last Ultraman World Championship. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience there after the COVID hiatus? Who were you crewing for? How did it go for your athlete? And what was it like having the Ohana reunion?
Man, that was like a pretty awesome experience. You know, I've been like for 3 years, 17, 18, 19, I've been racing and I've never been on the other side. And what I put Stacy Studer, one of my my crew member, and Ardis Bo, she was my crew member in a couple of Ultraman Worlds, and Caroline Bloom, and I had like Marcos Moya, Siddharth Rautre, and I have like few other friends who crewed for me. Now I see like, okay, I wanted to experience like what I put them through. So I was like, okay. And at the same time, like you have to give it back. Like you can't keep taking all the time. Like it's give and take. So, and I got an excellent opportunity when Cheryl called me. Cheryl Cobb, the race director, she reached out to me and said like, hey, are you coming? I was like, I haven't thought about it. It's like, hey, one of the athlete wants a shot of a crew, and I think you would be the good fit. I was like, okay, who is that? And she said, it's Antonina from Israel. I saw her racing at Ultraman Florida when I was crewing for another friend of mine, Siddharth Rautre, in 2022, February. And she won Ultraman Florida, and she was looking for, some kind of support to do Ultraman Worlds. And that's like, I want to be part of that support system. And like when she wanted us, like I immediately jumped in. I was like, okay, I booked the ticket in like say 15 minutes. And I said like, I'm coming in. Like it's just like a week before the race. That's when like Cheryl called me.
Oh,
And
wow.
prior to that, Randy Latza, he also raced 2022 Ultraman Worlds.
Yeah.
He was like putting the seed in my head, saying like, "Hey, buddy, are you coming? Maybe you should come." And then it was like he's been like throwing this. I think he threw my name with Cheryl, and then she was like, "Okay, let's pull him in." And I was like really fortunate to. I felt really honored to crew for this one of the like an amazing athlete from Israel, and she has like a really strong story how she became a triathlete and how she competes and how she came this far to do the Ultraman World Championships. So,
and what was it like for the reunion? You know, meeting up with all those people again in Hawaii.
It's a Christmas party. It's like even though it's Thanksgiving, it's more like Christmas for me. It's like meeting everyone. I made a bunch of my old friends, and some of them were crewing, and some of them were racing, and it's a beautiful experience. Like always, earlier during we had this Thanksgiving breakfast. I used to be worried about my race and like my nutrition and all of that. I never like relaxed to really enjoy that breakfast. This time I had nothing to lose. I have to be really free and like have that energy. So I had so much of that energy to enjoy the family reunion, and it was beautiful.
Now your own races, 2017, you DNF'd in 2017, 2018, 2019,
Yes.
went back for your revenge. There was a little something happening though at your 2017 race that maybe affected you mentally to prepare for going into that race. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what was happening at your 2017 Ultraman?
Yeah, I never shared my personal situation with anyone. I was going through a legal battle with my ex. Like I was going through divorce back then, and also I was fighting a custody battle for almost like 6-7 years, and the legal system in India is not in favor of men, because I think the pendulum of like has swung the other way. Earlier, like men took advantage of some situations, so it turned into the feminist, not feminist, but like favoring women, and without like considering like hey, it's not man or woman, it is human emotion. So I kind of lost that battle because I couldn't fight the Indian legal system, even though my son was born in US, and then like was married in India. Like in US, I was fighting battles in India because my son was taken without my permission to India, and India and US doesn't have. India is not part of the Hague Convention, and so any legal judgment in US is not honored by Indian courts. So that kind of didn't give me any power to fight for my rights. And I fought it, and not fought it. It's basically trying to get to a balanced platform so that like there is some justice to my son in terms of having both the parents, access to both the parents.
Yeah.
But I had to give up my son's rights and whatever the demands of my ex, so that I can release my parents, who were also got dragged into a legal battle because I was not in India. So they dragged my parents into this legal complication. So to rescue my parents, I had to let go everything. And this happened just the last few months before the race. And the court judgment was finalized, like say less than a week before my race. So I was even though I trained so well, I was completely drained, like spiritually as well as like, physically. So when I started the race in 2017, 2 miles into the swim, 2.5 miles into the swim, I've never puked. And 2017 was the perfect water conditions for the swim section. I started throwing up. I threw up every half an hour for next 4 hours. And my body was not like recovering. And I don't know what happened. It's just the energy and like there's so many factors. My body didn't cooperate with me, and that really impacted my day one. But
your body was telling you this is not the time to put me under this stress.
Yeah, that is so true. I pushed it. Like I remember, like I think probably first 8 hours, I didn't take. I think like the total calorie consumption was less than 100 calories for the first 8 hours.
Wow.
So it was
minus all the calories you left in the ocean.
Yeah. So it was
major
just like
deficit.
my body was. It was a major. Nothing was sitting in. Like Stacy, my race crew, Stacy Studer, and she was like struggling to feed me, and like nothing was sitting in. And at the end, like by the time I got my energies back, it was too late, and I was shot by 7 miles on day one. But day 2 and day 3, I went back strong and then completed the distance. So
yeah. And from what I've understood, just reading a few things about you, that's just the way you are, right? You're going to keep putting that one foot in front of the other, and it doesn't matter what battle it is, whether it's the green card battle or it's the battle to get your son or it's the battle to get to the end of one of these races. You've got a determination, a grit that you've developed throughout, I guess, all of these different trials that have put you where you are now. And I guess that also helps you to go back and face that race again. And you did something very smart to go back and face that race again, is you were able to reach out and get some help from the OGs of Ultraman, the 2 original winners, Kurt Madden and Artis Bow. And you started getting advice from them to go back and race again. Tell me about meeting them, getting some advice from them, and how they've helped you to get past the island.
Yeah, definitely. Hawaii, a big island, is a magical island, and you need to have the blessing of Madam Pele and the blessing of these legends. Like having these legends by your side is quite a blessing, a lot of strength. I met Artis Bow in 2017 during registration, and like I kept in touch with her, and she was phenomenal in actually making me understand like what it is to do an Ultraman, the path to Ultraman. Like earlier, like whenever you see when it's world championships, you want to go compete, you want to show your time, you are this fast, like everybody has that drive. They have done this, she has done this many times. It's like end of the day, it's the experience, you need to enjoy it, and she taught me how to really enjoy it at the same time in like a pushing your limits. So she doesn't do formal coaching, but she's like quite she's very good at like giving a wise advice where I don't do any mistakes. And then she suggested, hey, Kurt is still racing, he won the first world championships, I'll put a word and then I'll connect you with Kurt Madden. And she connected me with Kurt, and Kurt was like very gracious enough to take me as his athlete, and he started training me. And he's got a different approach, because when you see an athlete in his mid 60s kicking ass other like younger athletes, it's phenomenal. Like you have to see him race. Like there is so much of wisdom how you can continuously be that badass at that age. So you can push really hard, and then like I see a lot of athletes, they push in the peak age, and then like when they get to 50s, most of them drop down.
Right.
But to continue beyond 50s and 60s, you need to pace yourself. It seems like an ultra distance. Even though you're like a sprinter, when it comes to if you want to race long or go long, you have to pace yourself and then sprint when needed. Don't sprint all the time.
Right.
So I've learned a lot of things from both these legends, and I'm really grateful to have them in my life and in my journey.
Mm-hmm. The badass Kurt Madden has just finished another IM World Championship in Nice this past weekend, and he will be my guest at the end of October. Still an active racer and coach with TriDot, Kurt has been an Ultraman from day one, so there's likely no better person to share stories and advice on how to race than Kurt. Next up is one of the best storytellers to visit the show. When people talk to me or write me with comments on the show, this episode is one of the most mentioned for having such a great guest. In Season 3, Episode 10, I had Ferg Hawke as my guest. He spoke about his Badwater races and his many other ultramarathons, along with his entry to triathlon and Ultraman. We learned about his family and if his body has held up after all these years. Here's my intro for the episode with Ferg. My Ohana guest today is one of Canada's best-known ultramarathoners. He has competed at numerous 50 and 100-mile races, including the Rose City 50, the Eagle 100, Western States. He's also raced the Marathon des Sables and the 100-kilometer World Championship. Still, he is probably most well known for his 3 finishes at Badwater. He has also competed in Ultra Tri 2 times in Kona for the Ironman and once for the Ultraman World Championships. He has also served on the Canadian National Triathlon Team in 1991 in Surfers Paradise, Australia. Joining me from just a stone's throw away in South Surrey, British Columbia, it's Ferg Hawke. Welcome to 515.
Thank you. Thanks, Larry.
Well, let's get into some of those more legendary ultras that you've done. Then you've done the Western States in 1998, and
yes.
You were 18th overall at that race. Tell us a little bit about your experience there at the Western States.
Well, first, I probably have to just step back to the Eagle, which was my first 100-mile trail run. And prior to that, I was up in Penticton, I think just hanging out with some friends or whatever, and found out that there was like this 10-mile road race going on. So I competed in that. And then there was a wind-up party back at Steve King's house. At the time, he lived over, and I think it was Skaha Heights, kind of halfway down Skaha. So we rolled to Steve's place, and I felt pretty privileged to be hanging out with the legendary Steve King in his house. And I got to know Steve because I'd done some races over the years. And of course, he's announcing every race, and he would know more about my finishing stats than I ever did. It was quite amazing. So anyways, I'm at Steve's house, and I see on his mantle, there's his Western States 100 belt buckle. And I'm looking at this thing, and I'm just like, whoa, this is cool. And he walks by and he goes, "You'll have one of those one day, Ferg." And I kind of laughed. I went, yeah, let's go with that. But I think that it planted a seed. And then a few years later, I ended up signing up and doing the Eagle 100, which was a pretty nasty 100-mile race. There's, there was not a whole lot of aid stations. They were every, 8 or 10 miles apart. You kind of sort of almost had to find your way around the course a little bit. Mo puts on a great race, but, it's bare bones. And there was like 22,500 feet of climbing, I believe. So I survived that, got through that deal. And then I felt that I could probably now get my head around doing Western States. So back then it was a little easier to get in. I think I applied for the lottery one year and didn't get in. Then the following year I did. Mm-hmm. So I was able to qualify, and then, I went down, and it went really well. It was a real tough Western States year. It was a snow year. So the first 25 miles of the course was completely covered in snow. So that made it quite challenging. I think it's only one of two times that they extended the finish time, the cutoff time from 30 hours to 32, because they were concerned that people weren't going to have enough time to finish because of the conditions. And then it ended up being like stinking hot through the canyons and into Forest Hill and Auburn to the finish. It was like one of those close to record hot years. So it was a pretty challenging year. So, you know, I ended up doing quite well. I was very pleased with, you know, cracking the top 20 and it was kind of part of my discovery that I was kind of learning that the more difficult the race, the longer the race, the tougher the conditions seemed to be, the better I would kind of place in these races. And, you know, the pure speed races, maybe not so much, but ones where you had to really gut it out and grind, I always seemed to, you know, place a little higher. So that's what kind of took me to these other, you know, longer, tougher races.
Right. Yeah. And then, so one of those longer, tougher races that you moved on to was Marathon des Sables.
Yes.
And that's a stage race with different distances each day. You're running through the Sahara Desert. When you did it in a time of 22:51:03. That's for 150 miles. So can you tell us a little bit more about like the stages and explain that a little bit for the listener, and maybe, you know, how the stages break down and which one did you find the hardest?
It's a pretty unique race. First of all, the time is a little bit irrelevant because every year they change the course. They have a different little area of the Sahara, and they change when the dunes are. They always try to do an ultra stage, so typically a 50-mile stage, and they always try to do a dune stage where it's usually around between 30 and 40K with tons of the big giant sand dunes that are in the Sahara Desert. And then,
those would just fall out from under your feet, I'm assuming, as you're running.
Yeah. They were really difficult crossing that. And throughout the whole race, you're going through areas where there's dunes, and then it's gravel and rocky, and then dunes again. So it ended up, the terrain was super, challenging. And then maybe luckily, but the conditions there as well were just terrible. They had brutal sandstorms, the worst sandstorms apparently they had up to that point in the race, where the visibility was down to like maybe 50 yards or 50 meters or less. It was pretty crazy. So the first day wasn't bad conditions wise. And typically the first day and the last day are a little bit shorter. So I think it was like 25K maybe the first day. And then the rest of the stages are around 40K. And then there's the 50-mile stage, usually day 5. The day after that, the day after that is technically a rest day. Or if it takes you through the night into the next day, I believe you have to 11 o'clock the following day after the start of the 50-mile stage to finish. So a lot of people run through the night into the next morning, but if you're lucky enough to get it done in the day, it's technically a rest day, and then there's a marathon stage and then a shorter one to finish.
Okay.
And so my strategy was to try to run as fast as I could without working very hard and saving myself the best I could for that 50-mile stage. And then that stage, my goal was to just basically try to plan that off like it's an ultramarathon. It's a one-day deal. I figure if I got a rest day afterwards, I can get through that marathon. The last stage is shorter, like about a half marathon stage. So that was kind of my goal. So I started out, I think I was 30th overall after stage 1. And then stage 2, the sandstorms really picked up and the conditions got quite difficult. So I was able to kind of each day finish a little higher. And it was funny, there was a fairly good group of Americans there, and it was 8 people per tent in these Berber tents. And our tent was primarily Canadians, with my friend Monica Fernandez, who I met in Hawaii at Ultraman. She was the Ultraman champion one year. She's from Guatemala, and she's just a hoot. And we became really good friends. So when I told her I was doing this race, she goes, I got to come and meet you guys there and do it too. So we had Monica in the tent. And but anyway, and then there was a couple of American tents, and my friends after the stages were wandering around, and they're listening to these Americans, kind of behind my back, saying that big Canadian guy, like, he's going out way too hard. There's no way he's going to be able to hold that pace. And to be honest, I felt like I was pacing myself quite well. So I think by the time I got to the 50-mile stage, I was sitting in around 12th place, and then was having a great 50-mile stage until we got into the big sand dunes. So the race director Patrick Bauer decided for this year's race, we're going to make it even more interesting. We're going to have the sand dunes and the long stage on the same day. So about like halfway through the long stage, all of a sudden we're going through about 20 kilometers of these huge sand dunes in a crazy windstorm. So the sand was blowing. And anyways, I got into the sand dunes, and they mark the course for you. But as soon as you get in the sand dunes, you can't follow the footprints of the person ahead of you because they disappear instantly. And there's nothing to really mark the course. So you're kind of on your own. And part of the mandatory gear list for this race is you have to have like an anti-venom kit, and you have to have a mirror, and you have to have a whistle, and you have to have a compass. But nowhere in the instructions does it say you had to know how to use a compass. So that was a bit of a glitch. I got into the sand dunes, and I pulled out this compass, and I went, yep, the needle's pointing that way. Well, I don't know what the hell I'm looking at here. So I kept going, and I found there was a checkpoint in the middle of the dunes, found that, and then I carried on. When I came out of the sand dunes, there was supposed to be a checkpoint, and there was nothing. And there was terrible viz. So I would kind of run to the right for maybe 200 meters and stop, and then run to the left. And I was kind of going all over the place, desperate, because I think I was up into about, fourth place or fifth place overall in this stage. And now I'm like, I'm losing ground here. And then I heard the helicopter, they have a helicopter there, flew over, and it was hovering off to my left.
Right.
And I'm thinking, I wonder if he's hovering over the aid station to give us a little bit of kind of an idea where to go. So I just ran towards the noise. Sure enough, found the checkpoint, went through. And then now it was about a 14K flat grind to the finish line on this old dried out lake bed. But the wind's probably blowing 40 miles, maybe 50 miles an hour right in our face. And I had sunglasses on that were caked in sweat and now sand. So I made a bad decision by taking them off, putting them up in my hat, and squinting to see where I was going. And it got starting to get dark. So they had glow sticks in posts about every maybe 200 meters. So you could kind of see the glow stick, get to it, and then go past it. You couldn't see anything. And I was squinting into this, and then you'd finally see it again. So that just became your whole world. It was kind of going glow stick to glow stick to glow stick. But what was happening is the sand was getting impacted into my eyes, and I was trying to rub it out. And I ended up basically almost going blind. Could barely see by the time I finally saw a bunch of lights, and they had lined up a bunch of Land Rovers to kind of guide us in. And I got to the finish chute, and I couldn't even find where the finish chute was. Somebody guided me in. And then the doctors took me into the medical tent, and they flushed my eyes out and basically put some solution in, taped gauze over my eyes, and told me that I'd lacerated my corneas, and just to go to your tent, lie down, and whatever. But you're self-sufficient. So I get to my tent. I'm the first guy back from our group. Meanwhile, they had poured all the solution on my shirt, and now it's down to about 3 degrees, and the wind's blowing. I can't even find my way into the tent. So I find my sleeping bag in my pack, but it was blowing so hard, I was concerned some of my stuff was going to blow away. So I pulled my sleeping bag out, zipped my pack shut, couldn't make any food, couldn't find the food because my eyes were all taped up. So I just kind of slithered into my sleeping bag on the sand and just lied there and jackhammered and shivered for maybe, I don't know how many hours. And then my buddy Magnus from Vancouver, we've become really good friends since we kind of met for this race. He came in next, and he dragged me into the tent, and he cooked me a meal and kind of got me going again. And so, yeah, kind of rescued me a little bit. And
that's nice.
Had my eyes taped up the whole next day. The doctor said, like, the morning of the marathon stage, pull a tape off and you should be okay. I guess the tissue in the eyes are one of the fastest healing tissues in the body. So I was pretty skeptical, but I pulled this gauze off like the 2 days later for the marathon start, and I could see. It was a little blurry, but fine. And I was able to finish. So it was a pretty big scare because I was doing so well. And I ended up finishing 5th on that stage, which moved me up to 8th place. And then I hung on to 8th place at the end of the day.
And at the time, that was the highest placing by a North American runner. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. And there was a guy from North Carolina who was sitting 9th, and I had about a 15 or maybe a 10-minute lead on him on the final stage. So I thought, all I got to do is keep my eye on that guy. And if I can see him, I'm going to finish ahead of him and finish 8th and get the honor of being the top North American finisher ever at that point. And he ran like his ass was on fire on that last day. And I was so done. I was hanging on for dear life. We asked me what the hardest stage was. It was that 13-mile or 21K final stage. I was so done, and I had to basically race it as hard as I could to keep up with this guy. But it ended up hanging on anyways and finishing 8th. Yeah.
And what other kind of gear do you need to run a race like that? Are you running in like knee-high gaiters to keep the sand out of your shoes and stuff like that? Or
yeah, a lot of people were
protecting the eyes.
I was sponsored by Montreal at the time, and they actually made special shoes called Desert Storms, and they had a built-in gaiter on their trail shoe, which worked fantastic. So my feet were in great shape. If I could have just kept my glasses on, I would have been a lot better off at the end of the day. But yeah, no, so my feet were in good shape. But a lot of people had the big knee-high gaiters and created their own inventions, glued things on to keep the sand out or try to keep the sand out. It was pretty difficult to keep all the sand out because it's so fine. It gets into everything. Like my headlamp, the little switch on the headlamp was frozen solid. Like you couldn't move it anymore because the sand got in there, and your buttons on your watch got all impacted with sand. It was pretty crazy.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's some good tips for people that are planning on going to do that race, then, to think about those little extras that you need to think about with that sand and stuff that's going on there. Yeah.
And especially when it's that windy. Some years it's a lot more calm, and if the sand's not blowing around, it's a lot less of an issue for sure. But that year it was pretty crazy.
Yeah. People love getting tips on how to do these races because in some cases, not many people have experience. Maybe that's one of the reasons why people like that episode so much. There were a lot of tips packed into our conversation. Another guest that everyone comments on being so well spoken is Dede Griesbauer, who spoke in Season 3, Episode 13, shortly after she set the new women's record at the 5:15 distance. You may have seen her broadcasting this past weekend from Ironman World Championships in Nice. She is an active pro racer, and her broadcasting side gig is just one of the things that we talked about during our conversation. After replaying her intro for you, I'm going to quickly jump ahead in our conversation to one of our topics. My next Ohana guest started as an NCAA All-American swimmer and just missed attending the '92 Olympics. She gave up a VP job in a Wall Street firm to become a pro triathlete. She has 3 Ironman titles, including the Ironman UK, where she set a course record. In Kona, she has finished in the top 10 on 3 occasions for the Ironman World Championship. And a few weeks ago, she topped the other Kona podium, setting a course record of 23 hours, 22 minutes, and 58 seconds for the Ultraman World Championship. Joining me from the city that was the terrestrial home of Mork from Ork, Boulder, Colorado, it is the women's Ultraman World record holder, Dede Griesbauer. Welcome.
I've actually never been introduced that way, so congratulations. That's a first, Larry. Thank you very much.
And for you, I assume it's those hours of training, it's the coaching you're getting now that has brought you to this level to keep you strong enough to keep doing it. And you've also started to branch out a little bit because, as you said, you're not making your Wall Street dollars anymore. So you got to get a little side hustle going. You've done a couple different things. One of them is coaching with your crew. Maybe tell us a little bit about how you ended up getting involved in the coaching side. Obviously it's because you're hanging out with your friends all the time, but what is it that drew you to try and do some coaching on the side as well?
My first coaching client, it happened relatively early in my professional career. She was my next door neighbor. We lived in the same brownstone in Boston, and she had signed up for Ironman Coeur D'Alene. And she was like, "Will you coach me?" And I was like, "Jen, I don't coach." I'm like, I don't know the first thing about coaching. Like I wouldn't know what to do. She's like, "Well, you know more than I do." And I was like, all right. So I wrote a program for her, and she finished Ironman Coeur D'Alene, which was her goal. And she was thrilled. And little by little, just by word of mouth, word started getting out, and I started coaching more and more people and getting a little bit more confident in it. It's only been the last couple of years I've started coaching for the JD crew and under Julie Dibbins' coaching umbrella. And I actually, I had a pretty full roster of athletes, but I approached Julie and said, "Hey, could I be a part of this? Because what we've got going with the JD crew is really cooperative. I mean, I have my roster of athletes that I coach, but we have biweekly meetings with all of our coaches and give updates on our athletes and bounce ideas off of each other. Hey, I have this athlete who's battling this issue, and we can't seem to figure it out and break through it. You know, what do you guys think? And so it's made me a smarter coach. And I think it's helped my athletes as a result. Plus there's the community, right? The camps and the social things at races, et cetera, that is also beneficial and fun for the athletes. But for me, selfishly, being mentored by Julie as a coach has made me a more thoughtful coach. So it's been a great opportunity.
And what do you think it is about that Colorado area that draws so many triathletes? Like, I don't think, maybe you can tell me, do the athletes come to Colorado, or are they born out of Colorado? Like,
Colorado is a terrible place to race and train. Nobody should move there. No, I'm just kidding. It's getting overrun with triathletes. We want to keep it a secret. Honestly, there's great roads for riding. There's great trails for running. There are all of the things that make a training environment good. It's beautiful. It's close to the Denver airport. It's in the middle of the country, so it's easy to get to races on either side. It's, there's so many things about it, but I think it's not just triathlon. It's running, it's rock climbing, it's cycling. And so there's also the community of people who support us as athletes, strength coaches, PTs, massage therapists, sports psychologists. The best of the best are there. And it really has, I didn't realize this at the time. We moved to Boulder from Boston when I joined. I was working with Siri Lindley, and she moved her training base to Boulder. And my husband ended up randomly with a job opportunity in Boulder. And so we're like, yeah, Boulder would be fun. And again, we moved there thinking to be, a few years. He's settled into a great job there and is like very successful in his career. And for me, it's being in Boulder. I think if I was still in Boston, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing because there isn't the community there to support it in the same way at the professional level. So it's really prolonged my career. There's great swim squads. There's great masters, the things that triathletes need to be successful, and athletes in general, endurance or any kind of outdoorsy sport, the resources are there to keep you healthy and keep going. Right.
I was in Boulder this summer on a big road trip tour, and I thought it was just a great little town. It's definitely one I'd like to go back to. Like, it does have that small town feel to it, even though you're right next to Denver. But yeah, so I can see how that would be an attraction for a lot of people.
Yeah, we love it there. We're super happy. I don't see us going anywhere anytime soon.
And of course, the other side hustle that you've picked up on is doing commentary with Ironman. How long have you been doing that broadcasting now with Ironman?
Well, Ironman, I think I had done one world championship event. They brought me on as part of their commentary team to add a female voice. They didn't really have a regular female voice. And so they invited me to join the commentary team for 70.3 Worlds. I think it was in 2016 or 17. And I was so nervous. I literally sat there at the in the booth with the guys that I was with. I think I was with Matt Lieto and Michael Lovato. And anytime I had something to say, I literally put my hand up, and they were like, they're like, okay, this is a different way to go about it. I was so nervous. And it was in 2018, actually, that Ironman signed the agreement with Facebook where they're going to start broadcasting these races live on Facebook Watch. And so they were going to be doing a lot more races. It wasn't just the World Championship and the championship events that they were going to be covering. They were going to be covering a lot of races, which is great for the sport, right? We're like showing these professionals and telling their stories and making Ironman. I mean, it's not a spectator friendly event, but there's diehard fans, and the races are exciting the way that they unfold. And so being able to bring these races to people all over the world it was so exciting. And they asked if I wanted to be a part of it. And I leapt at the opportunity, and I love our team, and it's such a great opportunity. And I'm so thankful to be a part of it.
How do they decide who does what job? Who's on the course? Who's in the studio?
I don't know. They've never sent me out on the course. I don't, which is fine, because I would probably fall off the back of the moto if I'm being honest. Maybe they just figure I'm better sitting in a chair in the studio. It's safer. I don't know. I have great rapport with our entire team. So We do swap out. Oftentimes, they'll put Greg Welch down sort of at the hot corner of whatever race we're broadcasting. And Lyoto, they tend to put as our man on the street. Maybe they just don't want to call me the woman on the street because it would be controversial. I don't know. But for now, I'm in the booth. But no matter who's beside me in the booth, we have a great rapport. We have a fantastic team. Yeah. Not only our team of commentators, but the whole team at Ironman that supports us, and our team at BCC, in studio. They're great. And again, it's been educational for me. And it's in a lot of ways made me a better athlete, because the things that even in my long career, the things that I haven't experienced myself, I've now watched as a commentator. I have a front row seat to the best in our sport executing their craft. And I get to study it and talk about it with other people that have been around in the sport for a long time. And it's made me smarter. And I'm just, at the end of the day, I am the biggest triathlon nerd. Like, I'm just a fan of the sport. And so I love being able to tell these stories, and I get really excited to sit on the mic and commentate races. I just love it.
So have you got to the point now where, when you're like, I was watching the World Championship, and you guys started right off at body marking, and I saw Jane Bocas there, right front and center for the body marking. But are you able to now, like, if they do a pre-interview, are you able to tell the athletes, like, oh, that they're nervous right now, or maybe there's something they're not saying? Like, have you got to that point where you're able to read the athletes a little bit better now?
I think everyone tries to put on their best poker face, but you can, like, we definitely comment when we're off mic about, wow, they looked really, really nervous. Some people just wear their nerves in different ways. I don't think it's necessarily telling of the performance that they're able to have, but I think you do start to notice things about, when athletes go quiet on social media. There's speculation they must be injured. Like, we try to do our homework as to what's what, because it adds to the stories that we tell. But I don't think, it's just so hard to predict, right? I don't think anybody would have predicted. I mean, certainly people were predicting Norway, Team Norway for the Norwegians for the men's side, but I don't think anybody would have given Sam Laidlow the time of day. And the fact that he put out the performance he did was just so exciting. And we're sitting in the booth, like, up the edge of our seats, we're like, oh my God, he's doing it. And the same with Chelsea Sodaro. I mean, I don't think anybody would have been shocked to see her in the top 10. I don't think anybody picked her to win. And the fact that she, was able to hold on, we get to share that, and the excitement that we feel, I hope we impart to the people watching along. It's spectacular.
Mm-hmm. And I was watching you pronouncing all those Hawaiian names so well. Is that because you spend the time to practice those, or you just heard them so many times over the years? How long does it take for you to prepare for one of these races? Like, maybe just that last World Championship. How many hours are you putting into your prep?
I'm a studier. I like to be prepared. I think some of my co-commentators feel more comfortable sort of, I don't want to say winging it, but they like to experience a lot of things sort of firsthand as the race unfolds. Right. But I study. I go through the entire field. I read all of the notes, and, out of respect, our whole team goes through coaching for how to pronounce those Hawaiian words, out of respect for our host community, because to mispronounce them it's just not respectful. So we try to study and do it right. The same goes with the pronunciation of some of the names of the racers, right? Yeah. We mispronounce names all the time, but we try to, we work hard to not do that. So we appreciate when people correct us and guide us in the right way, and try to just, I like to do a good job. I take my job very seriously in that regard. So I'm a studier. I spent a lot of hours preparing for it. And I hope that shows.
Oh, it does. It definitely does. I don't think I could let you go without asking you about the 2-day format. What was your impression of the 2-day format, and now with the idea of it moving men's and women's to different locations? What are your feelings on these things that are happening with the race?
I was a huge advocate of the 2-day format, because I believe that the women deserve to race their race on their day.
Mm-hmm.
Our ability to cover the women more thoroughly because we have greater resources to dedicate to the women. And then again, to the men, we covered more men because we didn't have to take 2 of the cameras and send them to the women's race.
Right.
Like we could show more with this 2-day format. So I think I'm a big fan of it because it gives the women's coverage, having a woman first across the line. And I know maybe that doesn't make sense if you're a man. You're like, why does that matter so much? But it matters for women's sport that a woman be the first one across the line. It matters.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was a huge fan of the 2-day format. Obviously, I was concerned because I'm also deeply respectful of the community that we go to. And I thought, gosh, that's an awful lot of people and a lot of strain on a pretty small town with not a lot of roads, right? So obviously that was in the back of my mind. The fact that it hasn't worked out for both races to stay in Hawaii is incredibly heartbreaking. And when I heard about it, I really, there is no elegant solution, right? It's a dreadful scenario, and it's not going to be great for everybody. And someone ultimately, with the decisions they had to make, someone's going to be disappointed.
Right.
I do hope in the long run that we find a community where both men and women can be in the same place and race in that 2-day format in the same place. Because I think dividing the men and women, we're a community, right? That's what's so great about our sport is the community of Ironman. And the fact that we saw the Norwegians out there cheering for the pro women and then the pro women out there cheering for, the pro men and vice versa. I think to divide that detracts from our sport. So I do hope that eventually we find a community, whether it's back in Hawaii or whether it's somewhere else, where we can all be together, because I think we all need to be together. But for now, I love the fact that the women get to race their race without involvement from the men, be it age group men or pro men. And that same thing for the men. They get to race their race without the women. All of those pro men don't have to worry about getting caught by Lucy Charles Barkley in the swim. They all sleep a little bit better, I think, not getting past, being the second place woman out on the course when Lucy's out ahead of them on the bike. So I love the fact that the women have their own race. I hope that we can be together again one day in a single venue, because I think that's just what our sport deserves from a community standpoint. It's hard because I also admire the history that Hawaii offers, the inexorable link between Hawaii and the Ironman World Championship. Like I said, there's not a simple solution, and it's beyond my pay grade to make those decisions. So I'm a little heartbroken that we're not going to be together, but I like the idea that the women and the men have their own day and should be celebrated independently of one another, but we should do it collectively, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And do you have any suggestion as to where they might be putting this second race?
No, I can't. I don't.
Oh, okay.
That's beyond my pay grade.
Not okay. Is that I might know, but I'm not allowed to say, or I don't know? Don't know. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Sure. All right. Well, obviously, that conversation was after the last Ironman World Championships in Hawaii, with the men and the women each having their own day. I will have to catch up with Dede again to see what she thought of the Nice Championship. And now just a quick word about our sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultra Tri-Fest Canada, where you can race the traditional 515, a 515 relay, or a 515 nonstop. There's also a 360K format, which does not require a crew. And because we are hosting you in Whistler, there is also an ultra gravel race. Check us out at ultratrifestcanada.com. And if you've always wanted to go to a 515 World Championship, check out the information on the website about our new worldwide championships, which is available to every 515 racer of all time. Again, that is at ultratrifestcanada.com, coming to Whistler, British Columbia in August 2024. In Season 2, Episode 3, an episode called Leaving the Grind for the Love of Tri, I had two conversations with athletes who have given up their careers to simplify their lives and pursue wholeheartedly their love of triathlon. One athlete was Caroline Bloom, and the other is Arnaud Selukov. Arnaud is a European athlete and obviously does a lot of races on that side of the Atlantic. One of the things I really enjoy about doing this podcast is the fact that I can meet people from around the world and they can share with you experiences from all over. This is truly a worldwide podcast, both in audience and guests. Our audience currently has downloads in 94 different countries around the world. Here is Arnaud. Today's featured guest has completed 39 full-distance events and competed at Kona 8 times. He has 4 Ultraman distance races and a win at Ultraman Australia. He holds a number of world championships in his age group at various distances. These days, when not traveling, training, or racing, he is rescuing dogs and working with other athletes through his coaching business, 859 Coaching. Joining me from the Netherlands, where he will be racing tomorrow, please welcome Arnaud Selukov. Welcome to 515.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So where exactly are you at in the Netherlands right now, and what's the event that you're there for?
So, a small editing because you said 39. This is what I told you, but in between I've been racing a little bit more, and the count is at the moment at 41. So tomorrow is going to be my 42nd full distance. Tomorrow I'm racing the ITU long course, the Challenge Almere Amsterdam, which is the support for the ITU long course. And usually it's a race which is done on the old Nice distance, 4 kilometers, 120 and 30. But this year they are doing it on the full distance, the Ironman. So it was not planned, but it was not planned to be that close from Roth last weekend. But COVID has thrown a spanner in the wheel, and we had the race has been moved around. So
right.
These two races finally ended up on the calendar. One in the 5th of September last week, and one tomorrow. So I'm in Almere, which is the oldest European race, full distance European race, because the first race happened here in 1983. So like the first year of the Ultraman.
Yeah.
So tomorrow we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of this race. So it's a big event. It's a funny place because it's in a place that has been reclaimed on the sea. So it's absolutely pancake flat. And we are surrounded by windmills, so can give you an idea of the weather we are going to face. It's pretty windy and dead flat, and basically no protection. So, but it's part of the game, and it's. I hope it's going to be a very nice race, and I hope I will recover from last week.
Mm-hmm. And how did you do last week in Roth?
Not too bad. I went 8:59 and I was third in my age group, but the bike leg has been shortened a little bit by around 10 kilometers because there was some road construction and they couldn't get around. So I've been sub-9 twice already in Roth. So I was really happy to be in 8:59 again, but it was not the right distance. So I'm not going to claim it.
Yeah. That makes sense. I'm looking back on your history, and it looks like your story of what brought you to triathlon is not totally uncommon in the triathlon world. You come from a bit of a troubled background as a youth. Can you tell us a little bit about that background and what young Arnaud was like, so that we can kind of get a picture of what you've become as well?
Well, I hope my son are not going to listen, but I was I was absolutely not into sport, and I was trouble everywhere, and whatever I was doing, it was always trouble. So partying, and I've always been trying to be very good at what I was doing. So when I was partying and drinking and smoking weeds, I was very good at it. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, and especially when I was at the army, I've been for the first time in my life in contact with sport. So the captain of the place where I was doing my army time offered me a pair of shoes, and he was bringing me pretty much every day for running in the woods. So either you were doing the shore at the place where we were living, or you had the possibility to go running. So obviously I pick up running, and this is really where I discover and embrace sport. So was very much like a life-changing experience for me, and I will be forever grateful for that. Then
we had a lot of good conversation in this episode, but I'm going to jump ahead now to where he talks about his Ultraman experience. This is the 515 podcast, so we should probably speak a little bit about your Ultraman experience as well. So you found along the way that you enjoyed going longer, and then obviously, like most people do, you figure, well, what's longer than what I'm doing? And you discover that there's an Ultraman distance race out there. What were you doing at the time, and how did you find out about it? Who brought you to Ultraman, or what brought you to Ultraman?
That's a funny story, because it was a time where I was still drinking, and it was after Busselton, and still drinking. I mean, I was not alcoholic, but I was, having a few beer with mate and going out for party. And we were in Singapore with some of my friends, and one of them was Pete Short, and he's an Australian and a very, very good friend of mine. And we all raised Busselton, and we had a celebration party at a restaurant. And then we went for some more drinks, and we were pretty drunk at the time. And Pete took out his iPad and he said, "I'm just going to register for an Ultraman right now." And I was just, "What are you doing? And what is an Ultraman?" And then we started talking, and then we were 4, and 3 of them registered. And this is how I would say maybe the seed was planted. And I was thinking, oh, it's interesting. And then the next day, when the hangover was gone, they tried to push back their registration for the following year, because they thought that maybe they've done something stupid. But I was keep thinking of that. And it was the first year of Ultraman Australia. I think it was 2015. And 2016, I decided to race Ultraman Australia. And I went there with no expectation. My coach at the time was Cameron Brown. And we tried to change a little bit the way I was running. And I think I was running pretty well at the moment. But it's hard, because when you are new to Ultraman, the distance are so big, and how are you going to adapt your training to that? So the decision was pretty simple, was to try to train like for an Ironman and just had some very long training session in the middle. Mm-hmm. And it worked pretty well, because I won the race, and it was a magical experience for me. And I think on my tombstone, I want to have my name and winner of Ultraman Australia 2016. That's all I want. The experience was amazing, and it's a small field. I think I discover. I'm not big at writing, but I wrote a race report after the race, and I say I discover a side of my sport where the grass is greener, and it was very much my thought, because I done just 4 Ultraman, but I've made more friends in the 4 Ultraman than in my 41 Ironman. Mm-hmm. And I raced Ultraman Australia, and then the year after I raced Ultraman Hawaii, where I got a demonstration by Rob Gray of what is a great performance. And then the year after I raced Ultra 515 in Canada. And I got my ass kicked also by Dave Matheson, mm-hmm. and amazing athlete and a good friend also. And then in 2019, I went back to Ultraman Hawaii. Mm-hmm. And so I always race well there, and I love the format, I love the race, I love the people, and you get the feeling that when you go to this race, you always meet the same people, and if it means going to Hawaii to meet your friend, then so be it, and just have a good run on the Queen K and see what happens. But I think one of the strongest friendship I've made in this sport was with the people I met at Ultraman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what Ultraman's all about, is the Ohana and the connections that you make, and I think that's why people,
absolutely,
once they're in, they never leave. It's like a mafia.
Yeah. And it's like the girl doing the massage at Ultraman Australia, she actually ended up crewing for me at Ultraman Hawaii. Gail Lowe, that certainly and she went and she came with one of her friends, and there is always support, and I always tell the story, but when I raced the first time in Ultraman in Hawaii, I raced the Ironman a few weeks before, and when I was in the transition in the morning, I asked the guy beside me if he can give me his pump to pump my tire, and he said no. And I was just like, oh shit, what a dick. And then when I raced Ultraman on day 2, I was leading the race and I was making time on Rob Gray, and I lost my crew. And it's actually the crew of Rob Gray who came to me and asked me if I needed food or drink or anything, despite the fact that I was gaining time on him.
Yeah.
And
that's the Ultraman way.
Exactly, that's the whole idea of the thing, and it's treating me so much better. And I'm a bit sad that the past 2 years we haven't been able to race there. Mm-hmm. But the race will happen again, I think, maybe next year, and hopefully we can meet again. All these small, it's just 40, 50 people, but there is something, there is a connection, and. And for me, every time I'm coming home after racing an Ultraman, it's like if the human race is feeling, you have a better feeling for it. The people are nicer, and it's just something. It's a special thing, very special for me.
Obviously, episode 1 with Steve King and Chad Bentley has been my most popular download, because it does have Steve King and Chad Bentley, and it's the first episode of the podcast, and it's been around the longest. People want to go check out the first episode. But my next guest episode shot right to the top of the most downloaded episodes to place second in just over 1 month after its release, and it still regularly gets more downloads. This is Season 3, Episode 8. My conversation with RAAM racer and Ultraman Rick Kent. After Rick's racing career ended, which is discussed in the episode, he went on to become a race photographer, and that's how I first met him in Penticton back in 2010. Here's the intro to Rick's episode, which will then jump ahead afterwards to him describing his cycling career in My Ohana guest today started as a cross-country runner in his home state of Texas as a youngster, and like so many in his era, was turned on to triathlon by watching the Hawaii Ironman on ABC's Wild World of Sports in the early 80s. He had a very successful amateur cycling career, and that turned to ultra cycling, including racing at RAAM 6 times and finishing as high as 4th place there. In one of those races, he became the 7th person to cross the continental USA in under 9 days by bicycle. Along the way, he's held a number of ultra cycling records, including the US 100-kilometer time trial on track and a world record for 24-hour road time trials. In 1999, he finished in 3rd place at Ultraman Canada, behind Ultraman legends Nick Millett and Sergio Cordero. Although he missed going to Kona for Ironman by finishing 1 place at a qualifying twice, he did race the Ultraman there 3 times. When he retired from racing, he started a career in sport photography, and many in this audience will know him for his photos at Ultraman races. Joining me from my favorite Texas city, his hometown, Austin, Texas, it's birthday boy, Rick Kent. Happy birthday, Rick.
Happy birthday. Yeah. I turned 39, by the way.
Oh, 39
yesterday.
again, huh?
Yes, again. That's right.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Few people will get that joke, but there's we'll see if they can find out.
All right.
I never got an Ironman, but I continued to try for 4 more years.
Mm-hmm.
But after 2 more years, after I got to, I think it was 86, it was pretty much, you can tell, so many people were getting into the triathlon, especially so many swimmers.
Mm-hmm.
I never developed swimming as a talent.
Mm-hmm.
I had my hands full with cycling and running. I was really just a runner too. I became a good cyclist, not a great cyclist. It took me several more years until I started to realize I was getting good because I was staying up with the top guys, like, training rides. I'd be one of the sprinters for sprinting for signs.
Right.
And
yeah, you ended up as a pretty high-end amateur cyclist when it comes to racing.
I was a Cat 2, Category 2.
Mm-hmm.
Category 1 is national team level. Right. Category 2 is, you're the top of your region. Right. But different regions were different. If you were in Colorado and you were 2, that was a lot better than being a Category 2 somewhere else.
Oh, yeah.
We had a huge base of cycling in Texas, especially Houston and Dallas, but these are flat areas.
So other than RAAM, which we'll get into in a little bit, what are some of the other more prestigious or, famous events maybe that you've raced in your cycling circuit that you're proud of and that you enjoyed?
My favorite biking event was my last professional event, which was it was called the Giro d'Italia Upa Tappa, which means Circle of Italy in one stage. Mm-hmm. So as opposed to the Giro d'Italia, everybody knows about, that's a stage race. So they invited me and they invited this French guy named Dominique Colliard, who anybody that I raced against, like Dominique, in RAAM and all these, I became great friends. It's just but he won. I said I would finish the event. I said the winner would finish in 72 hours. And Dominic finished in 72 hours. I was 3 hours after him. It rained incessantly, and it was so brutal. There was over 100,000 feet climbing, probably way more than that. And then the rain, and the climbs weren't generally long, steep climbs. They were just very steep, short climbs. I remember going through San Marino, it was raining, and by the time we were all alone. All of the cyclists were generally by themselves with their crew, suffering through this mess. I found out during the race that some of the people in the back were just holding on to their support vehicles and, pretty much doing that. That's not uncommon in Europe.
Oh, yeah.
But when I finished, before the race and after the race, I got a lot of media, video cameras and interviews, and I always had to have an interpreter. They always had the interpreter next to me. And the night before the race, there was this, they call them chat shows. But what it turned out to be was me and this Italian woman that was like the ultra hero of ultra cycling in Italy. And they don't really have ultra cycling. I never heard of her. Right. But it was funny. They just had me and her. They should have had Dominique come out there too.
Right. Yeah.
And it was because I was American. That's all that was.
Yeah.
Rick Kent, the American hero. I heard that a lot over there. Here's the biggest part of that event that it affected me. I finished in second place, 3 hours behind Dominic, but they waited to have the press conference until Rick Kent, the American Hero, finishes. So Dominic had to hang around,
Yeah.
So I did that, and I have all the pictures on Facebook from that, me holding up my trophy, and the interpreters next to me, and they're asking me questions, and the professional photographer they had was very good. So I have pictures from it.
Right.
But after that race, it would be a triathlon called Iron Alps. That Dominique, that guy that beat me, he sent me an invitation. He was the race director for that. That was from Grenoble, France to Turin, Italy. That was so it was in 4 stages, but it was just an Ultraman. Jane Bacchus, Ultraman owner in Hawaii, she and Dominic had it set up to where that was going to be Ultraman Europe. But kind of towards the last couple of months, some kind of thing. I don't think he had the proper insurance or something, but she yanked the that whole deal.
Right. Okay.
And so he changed to Iron Alps, which I didn't care. But I got to on the third stage, was a 185 mile bike. I got to go over the Galibier and the Telegraph, which at the time didn't mean that much to me. I just, I would lead the whole way after the first climb. Went up this climb for 10 kilometers, really steep. And Eric Seedhouse, he had won the Defi. It's called, that's his nickname, the Defi. It's in Grenoble, the hometown of the race director. It's a triple continuous Ironman. And that's a very, very serious endeavor. You get to the bike and you're reduced to walking within 10 or 20 miles. And if you try to run, you're going to collapse and you're going to be in the hospital. Dominic won the first two, or the first one. And then he invited, he got Eric invited, or Eric was there. And Eric won by a nice wide margin. But then he won Iron Alps overall. I won stage 2 or 3, and I still have that course record. That's the only big course record I have to this day that I would, kind of say I'll be proud of. And I had of course Paris in 2003. I was hired to do that event to support this woman, this wealthy woman, and pace her the whole way. It's got like 5,000 people. It's like the Olympics of the touring amateur cycling.
Okay.
Of ultra cycling. Yeah. They have 14 control stations. You have to get this thing like a credit card, so they can record your time and location. And which we call it PBP. PBP is a very important event in cycling in Europe. Over here too. I mean, the most entries are from, there's 500 of those 5,000 are from America.
And that's like 1,200 kilometers?
1,200 kilometers, 750 miles. It's more commonly referred to as 1,200 kilometers. But to qualify, it's kind of a pain. You have to do a 200 kilometer, a 300 kilometer, a 400 kilometer, which now you're 400 kilometers, 250 miles. So, and then 600 kilometer. You have to go to certain events called brevets in the randonneuring. It's around this world of randonneuring rides, brevet rides. All those rides with my credentials. I mean, come on, they won't waive guys like me or any elite RAAM guy. Like if you've done RAAM, that didn't matter to them at all.
Yeah.
But what it's doing, though, I suppose, it's showing that you can be self-supported because there's no crew.
Mm-hmm.
There's no, I suppose you can kind of have a crew by having them at every checkpoint, but no cars can be on the course.
Right.
And at the last minute, the woman that was sponsoring me, it came out to be a little over $5,000, all expenses, and I wasn't charging her a fee at all. She was a prior friend from Houston. I was living and working in Austin by then, working at Apple. I jumped at the chance to get her support, at no cost to me. But then we did the brevets that we did to get in were all condensed into an 8-day period, which most people would consider that quite a challenge.
Yeah.
It's not really. So 200 kilometers the first day, the next day, 300 kilometers, 2-day break, you do 400, and then a 3-day break, you do the 600. And it's in Wisconsin in the summertime, 2 months before PvP, but the woman decided that I wasn't a good pacer. We didn't gel mentally.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted, at that brevet week, I treated it like training for her. So I paced her all the time. But at one point, it came to where she said, "Don't go so fast. Rick, you need to slow down a little bit."
Yeah.
But this is a very fit woman.
Right.
Her name is Ann Bond. And this is a very seriously good and very, very determined mentally woman. But she decided she wanted to change to Bob Forney, who was one of my mentors in RAAM.
Mm.
So I got to do PvP, but not supported. I would never dream of doing anything unsupported.
Mm.
I'm Rick Kent, the American hero. No, but not really. I was just used to having a crew,
right,
and having it very professional. I just ended up doing this ride unsupported, and it was a very fulfilling experience. And so I'm very lucky that Ann sought me out, even though we didn't end up together doing it. So what was your next question?
Well, I just want to talk a little bit about how you are more experienced with these supported races by doing RAAM. At that time, you're doing RAAM quite a bit. You had 6 attempts at RAAM. You completed 5 of them. You finished as high as 4th place in 1992. What first got you into doing RAAM? How did you get into that world?
There's a very simple answer to that.
Well, we have run out of time, so if you want to know the rest of that story and get some of Rick's tips for racing and photography, listen to Season 3, Episode 8. I hope that you've enjoyed this retrospective episode. Join us again in 3 weeks to hear about a 5:15 race in Spain called Infinity Man.
Hey, if you liked what you heard today, please tell a friend and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'd appreciate it if you'd rate and review the show while you're there. Drop the names of the people you think we should interview and we'll get in touch with them and make that happen. Thank you for listening to 515, the Ultra Podcast, a production of 55 Enterprises.